Thank you, by the way, Christina. That was a beautiful, beautiful song. You know, obviously I've never been a parent, and certainly I've never been a mother, but these words from the heart of a mother really, I believe, encapsulate the message of today's message today. I've entitled it Opposite Hearts. But here's the poem. The author is unknown. One day, as I was picking the toys up off the floor, I noticed a small handprint on the wall beside the door. I knew that it was something I'd seen most every day, but this time when I saw it there, I wanted it to stay. Then tears welled up inside my eyes. I knew it wouldn't last, for every mother knows her children grow up way too fast. Just then I put my chores aside and held my children tight. I sang to them sweet lullabies and rocked into the night. Sometimes we take for granted all those things that seem so small, like one of God's great treasures, a small handprint on the wall. You know, often we speak in church of the great feats of men, usually men and women, but usually we speak of the men who have done what we see as great things in the cause of God. We speak of the great prophets like Moses and Elijah or the Apostle Paul, and we give acclaim to their heroism, their piety, their boldness in the line of duty. We see the great responsibilities that these men had, the tremendous pressure of their calling, and how through God's grace, these men changed the course of history. I don't know about you, but sometimes I'm tempted to think, yeah, but that was them. That was Paul, that was Moses. They had great responsibility, but they also had great opportunity. You see, God doesn't call everyone, like he called Moses, to lead his people out of the land of Egypt. It's tempting to think that, you know, if I had just a little bit more opportunity, perhaps I could do more with my life. If only I wasn't stuck in Podunkville, Kentucky. If only I had more friends. If only I were better looking. If only I were a little bit more talented. If only I had a better paying job. If only I didn't have to spend so much time taking care of the kids or the parents. If only, yes, if only things were different, perhaps I would have a better chance at making something of my life. Perhaps, yes, then, if only then, I could be the one to change the world. And we pine away our lives, walking in the shadows, in a garden of regrets, of envy, of if-onlys, and what might have been. You know, if ever there were someone who could complain about what might have been, it would have been a nameless little girl, a slave girl, carried away long, long ago from the land of Israel. She had a home once, a loving family, but the Syrian army had come, had raided her home, and we can only imagine what tragedy would have befallen her parents. She lost everything she knew. She was taken far, far away to a land not where she would have a home, but where she was to be a slave, in the home of the ones who were responsible for the tragedy that had befallen her family. If anyone would have a reason to complain, it would be her. She never had a childhood after this. She couldn't go to school. She couldn't run or play with her family, with her friends. She couldn't run to the arms of her father and mother. It seemed that every opportunity of life was crushed. And to add insult to injury, she was forced to serve in the home of the very man who was responsible for taking everything from her life. We find this story actually in 2 Kings chapter 5. If you want to turn there in your Bibles, 2 Kings chapter 5, verses 1 and 2. I'll begin reading. We'll go through a lot of this chapter here in our time this afternoon. 2 Kings chapter 5 and verse 1. Now Naaman, commander of the army of the king of Syria, was a great and honorable man in the eyes of his master, because by him the Lord had given victory to Syria. He was also a mighty man of valor, but he was a leper. And the Syrians had gone out on raids and had brought back captive a young girl from the land of Israel. She waited on Naaman's wife. This mighty man, Naaman, had one problem. Of all the things going for him in his life, he had this one dreaded disease, this disease of leprosy. This disease that would eat away at the skin, and it would eat away at your flesh, little by little by little. First causing numbness, then it would filter, and the complications of this disease, as the injuries would come, pretty soon it would seem like the fingers would just fall off, the toes would fall off, the flesh would rot. You would become an outcast from society. And pretty soon he knew that if this disease progressed far enough, he would no longer be able to be the commander of the army. His life would be defined by this dreaded disease of leprosy. Now, if I had been this little slave girl, I would have thought, or at least been tempted to think, finally there's a little of justice in this world. This man who has taken me from my family, finally, he's getting justice. He gets what he deserves. A slow, lingering, painful death. That would have been if I had been that little girl. But it's a good thing I wasn't. Because that wasn't her attitude at all. There's something in the heart of this little girl, something that's difficult for me to understand. Perhaps it's something that we call grace. Perhaps we could use the word gratitude. I believe it's both of these. But in truth, it can be nothing short of the Spirit of God. For nothing apart from Him could give her this heart of gold. Look at this in verse 3. Then she said to her mistress, If only my master were with the prophet who is in Syria, for he would heal him of his leprosy. Despite her circumstances, despite all the bitterness and hatred that she could have had in her heart for this captor of hers, all she had in her heart was love and compassion and a desire, a true and sincere desire that he would be healed. Well, Naaman saw this. Verses 4 and 5, and Naaman went in and told his master, saying, Thus and thus said the girl who is from the land of Israel. And the king of Syria said, Go now, I will send a letter to the king of Israel. What an unlikely chain of events. Why would this Syrian captain of the army even condescend to listen to this girl? Well, for one, surely he was desperate. He'd probably exhausted every means that he could to try to find some kind of healing from this disease. And still his body was languishing away. He was willing to grasp at straws if need be, and certainly this was a long shot. But it seemed his only chance. But there was something else. There had to have been something else for him to even listen, even this much, to this little girl. It's because he knew from his wife and from knowing what he knew of her that she genuinely cared. This was not a put on. This was not a front. She wasn't trying to get him into a trap with the king of her country. No, in the sincerity that can only come from the heart of a child, she honestly wanted to do him good. You see, I have to think that the essence of what made this little maid's heart different was something that we find in this word, gratitude. Gratitude is far more than just saying thank you. Hey, thanks, as we say today. Thanks a lot. I appreciate that. You know, we throw this word around, and especially this time of year, we talk about Thanksgiving, we talk about the turkey, and we gather around and say, thank you, Lord, for the sunshine and for the rain and for the blessings that fall upon us. And it's all flowery and pretty words, but what does it mean? What does it really mean to be thankful to have our hearts filled with gratitude. I believe that at its heart, gratitude is not something that we say, but it is a lens through which we see the world. A lens, if you will, that overlooks the injustice that is done to us and allows us to recognize and keeps ever before our eyes our eternal indebtedness to another. It looks at our lot in life not in the terms of what it might have been, but I guess you could say in terms of what it might have been the other way. So in other words, instead of looking at how much better I deserve, we recognize how much worse we truly deserve, and how indebted we are to another, yes, to the giver of all good things, for the blessings that we receive each and every day. This was something that little maid understood. This is why she was able to say, "Oh, I wish that my Syrian master were able to go and be healed of his leprosy." She, as it were, forgot all of the injustice done to her, though I'm sure it pained her heart every day to think of her family that she had lost. Yet her one care in life was for the ones that she was living with now. And this life message of the little maid had its effect on Naaman. Naaman himself, as proud as he was, recognized that there was something in her heart that he desperately needed. He longed for healing from this dreaded disease, and he longed to have the peace that this little maid had and had brought to his home. And if there was a chance that healing could be found, even in the land of his enemies, he was willing to go and be healed. So he got a letter from the king. He prepares this entourage as only the captain of the Syrian army could prepare, and he goes to meet the king of Israel. And I just wish I could have been a fly on the wall in the palace that day when Naaman and his entourage march in, and Naaman plops down his letter in front of the king and says, "King of Israel, I'm coming here for you to cure me of my leprosy." The king, his mouth drops open. He tore his clothes. He says there in the scriptures, "Am I God to kill and to make alive?" What kind of a trap is this? The king of Syria certainly is trying to start a quarrel with me. I can't help you. No, the king of Israel couldn't help him. But there was one in Israel who could. And he was the king of Israel, the true king, the God of heaven, of whom Elisha the prophet was his representative. And before Naaman could leave town, Elisha hears word that the king has torn his clothes, and he sends for Naaman. "Come to my house, Naaman." So Naaman goes down to meet Elisha. By now, Naaman has to be thinking to himself, I wonder if this was really a good idea, to come to the land of our enemies, to look for healing. Maybe this wasn't such a smart move after all. But he goes, he's already there, he goes down to see the prophet Elisha. And he expects, as any dignitary would, that the prophet Elisha will come out of his house and greet him in proper respect for such a royal dignitary. So he goes to Elisha's house. Nobody's outside, so he knocks on the door. Hey, pretty soon the door opens. He expects to see Elisha, but he sees only a servant, Gehazi. Is Elisha home? Yes, Elisha's home, but he sent me here with a message. Naaman, just go down to the river and wash 7 times in the Jordan River and you will be clean. Now, you have to understand, this was a direct insult to Naaman's pride. I mean, think about it, okay? If the President of the United States, or one of the dignitaries or governors or military commanders were to come to your house, would you send your 6-year-old kid to the door and say, go tell him, go see what he wants? I mean, seriously, would you? I mean, for such an... But there was an important message for Naaman in the fact that Elisha sent Gehazi, the servant, to go and give him the message. You see, it wasn't about Naaman's rank or position. And if Naaman was ever going to be healed, it would be by exercising faith. We'll get there in a minute. So Naaman goes off in a rage, and we see there in verses 11 and 12. Indeed, Naaman says, indeed I said to myself, he will surely come out to me and stand and call on the name of the Lord his God, and wave his hand over the place and heal the leprosy. Are not Abana and Pharpar, the rivers of Damascus, far better than all the waters of Israel? Could I not wash in them and be clean? How humiliating to get down in the muddy Jordan River. He expected Elisha to come out as some kind of magician and just wave his hand over. I wonder, I have to laugh really at this story. Because how many times have I prayed to God, God, answer my prayers. God, here's how. And let me tell you how to do it. God, I know you promised to take good care of your children. He's promised to take good care of us, hasn't he? Has God promised to take good care of us? Of course he has. So I'm claiming your promises, Lord. Now, really, what I need is some money. And in order to get some money, I need to have a good job. In order to get a good job, I need a good reputation. And I need more friends. And most of all, I just need all my trials to go away. Now, I don't know if I've never really prayed that, because that kind of sounds like really, really irreverent, right? To actually say it like that. But I have to confess, I've kind of prayed a few prayers that came kind of close to that. How often do we want to tell God how to answer our prayers for us? And then when God doesn't do exactly the way that we asked him to do, we lose faith, we lose heart, even when he's taking us on a journey to get us where we really want to go. Even though where we told him that we did want to go, wouldn't take us where we want to go anyway, would it? Why, Lord? We say, why? We go through trials. God leads us down a road we didn't feel like we wanted to go on. We get angry and upset, and we walk away from him right on the verge of receiving the greatest blessing. So Naaman was on his way back to Syria. He'd given up. Nope, I'm not doing that. I am not getting down out of my chariot at the word of a servant, no less, to get down in that muddy Jordan River and wash off. I mean, does he think I'm dirty or something? Who does he think I am? That was his attitude. So he's on his way back to Syria. Verse 12, so he turned and went away in a rage, and his servants came near and spoke to him and said, my father, if the prophet had told you to do something great, would you not have done it? How much more then when he says to you, wash and be clean? I have to stop right here, because isn't this such a beautiful picture of the gospel? Jesus offers us cleansing through his blood, full and free. Yet how many are willing to partake of it? How many walk off and leave Jesus' sacrifice unheeded? They don't even care. And yet those same people will go to the ends of the earth, will spare no expense to try to find peace and happiness outside of Jesus Christ. They will spend their life fortunes doing something to earn salvation. But just to wash and be clean, just to accept Jesus, just to say yes without doing anything at all, it's too easy, it's too simple. It's too unintellectual, too humiliating. But this humble and wise servant of Naaman speaks to Naaman, perhaps even unwittingly, the foundational principle of the gospel. How much more when he says to you, just wash and be clean. You don't have to do anything. You're already here. You're right by the Jordan River. Just get down, get in the river, and try it out. See if what the prophet told you is true. So, Naaman, though he's still perhaps in a rage, his Something in his heart is touched. He's struggling in his heart. But he says, all right. He goes down to the river, verse 14. So he went down and dipped 7 times in the Jordan, according to the saying of the man of God. And his flesh was restored like the flesh of a little child, and he was clean. Wow. That's the beautiful message of the gospel, my friends. Wash and be clean. What was it that cleansed Naaman's leprosy? Was there something magical in the waters of the Jordan River that washed away leprosy? No. It was his faith. However weak his faith was, he had enough faith to get down in the river and dip 7 times in the river. And God rewarded his faith. The healing came only and entirely from God. Nothing that Naaman did except to exercise faith and humble obedience. And as he came up from those waters of the Jordan River, and as he saw his skin transformed before his eyes from this white, lifeless, decaying flesh to the healthy, new flesh like a baby, he saw that miracle happening before his eyes. His heart was instantly filled with gratitude. And he knew that he owed a debt to the God of heaven, the God of Israel, a debt that he could never repay. Verse 15, and he returned to the man of God, he and all his aides, and came and stood before him and said, indeed, now I know there is no God in all the earth except in Israel. I'm convinced. I need no other evidence. This is the true God. But he goes on, now therefore, please take a gift from your servant. You know, if I take my car to the mechanic shop and I have to have new brakes put on my car, and he takes it apart, puts the new parts on, and I go back to get my car, and what do before I drive my car away? I pay for it, right? It's an exchange, okay? So Naaman has come to the prophet Elisha. He did what Elisha told him to do. Now he comes back to pay for it. But how can you pay a man for something that God did? And Elisha knows that the miracle that he has witnessed is nothing to do with Elisha or Gehazi or anyone else. It has everything to do with the God of heaven. And he says, no, I will not take a gift from you. I will not take payment for something that God has done. Elisha understood this principle of gratitude, to know who is the giver of all good gifts. And though Elisha could have well used a little bit of money, the prophets in that day, they lived a poor life. You read some of these stories, the children of Israel went through a famine, and they went together, made this pot of stew, and it was basically, they put in everything they had, and when they had put in everything they had, they went out and gathered these gourds and put it in, and the stew was poisoned. And it was a tragedy because they were going to go hungry because this was all they had. This was the kind of life that they lived. You can imagine how they would have loved to have a little bit more money, right? But Elisha says, no. And then Naaman goes on to describe how he says, from this day forward, I'm going to be a worshiper of the true God. I will no longer worship idols. And he goes on to clarify, he says, the king of Syria, when he goes into the house of the idol to go and worship there, I'm going to have to go and help him. I'm going to have to bow down. But when I bow down in front of that idol, I'm not worshiping that idol. I'm going to be worshiping the God of heaven because I know that the God of heaven is the only God in all the earth, all of heaven and earth. And he gets up in his chariot and he begins riding back to Syria, a changed man, with a heart full of gratitude. I wish the story ended there, but it's not the end of the story. You see, back there in Elisha's house was another man, this servant, Gehazi, who had seen everything that went on. And his heart was boiling over, not with gratitude, but with covetousness and greed. Elisha, don't you realize your chance? He didn't say all this. This is what he's thinking. You have missed your chance of a lifetime. Do you realize how much money this man has? And he brought it here to give to you, and you did not take it. You're letting him go back to Syria with his cash. So as soon as he gets a chance, he slips out of the house. He runs after Naaman. He goes, and as soon as he gets there, what does he do? He makes up a story. Well, you see, these sons of the prophets came just when you left. They came, and they really could use some clothes, and they really don't have anything. Some clothes and a little bit of money. Oh, Naaman is all too happy to give him some money, give him some gold and silver and clothes. Gehazi takes it back, hides it in a place where it won't be found by the prophet Elisha. He tries to cover all of his tracks, and he comes in and acts like nothing's happened. Elisha asks him, "Where have you been?" He tells another lie. "I didn't go anywhere." Verse 26. Elisha says, "Then he said to him, 'Did not my heart go with you when the man turned back from his chariot to meet you? Is it time to receive money, to receive clothing, olive groves and vineyards, sheep and oxen, male and female servants? Therefore the leprosy of Naaman shall cling to you and to your descendants forever.' And he went out from his presence leprous, as white as snow." Whoa. Two men, two hearts. One man came with leprosy and left with a heart of gratitude. The other came with a heart of greed and left with leprosy. Gratitude. What is the difference? What makes the difference in the lives of these two men? It is an indebtedness, a recognition that in my life, I have far more than I deserve. And what I have is a gift from the giver of all good things. It's like that poem that we read. How often do we go through life looking at those handprints on the wall and wishing that life wasn't so hard, when instead we could look at those handprints on the wall as a symbol of what we have and what we can be thankful for. How easy would it have been for the little maid to go through her life angry and bitter toward her captors? And perhaps rightfully so, we could justify. If anyone could justify it, surely she could. And yet by going through life with gratitude, her master, Naaman, learned of the true God. And even today, we have this story so that we can learn the meaning of gratitude. So my friends, I ask you, which will it be? Which heart will you have? It's so easy to fall into that trap of envy, covetousness, jealousy, greed. But may we this season learn the lesson of grace, of thankfulness, of gratitude, to accept God's gifts in whatever form they come. Jesus said in Luke 4, verse 27, "Many lepers were in Israel in the time of Elisha the prophet, and none of them was cleansed except Naaman the Syrian." Why? Why was Naaman healed when the others weren't?
He humbled himself.
Because he humbled himself. He accepted God's gift with gratitude.